interesting that the BBC, for example, very comfortable talking about a French far-right party being racist, certainly historically racist, but still not that comfortable describing far-right parties in this country as racist. We may have a little look at what the differences are between our two respective countries. But I want to begin with, I'm going to have to use the word supermajority. And there was a little bit of me that thought, no, you shouldn't use it because it's meaningless. But it has become meaningful in a sense, albeit that it is still meaningless. It has become, if you can bear philosophy on a Monday morning, it has become simultaneously both meaningful and meaningless. Because democratically and constitutionally speaking in this country, it is meaningless. There is no such thing as a supermajority. It's a word borrowed from American politics, where it is used to describe something very, very different from what right-wing media and the Conservative Party are using it to describe here. But nonetheless, it has become a shorthand version of saying a mahusive. That's a very technical term that I learnt when I was doing my politics A-level. A mahusive majority for the Labour Party. So it looks to me as though the Tories are currently dedicating the last 3 days of the campaign to trying to spook the population by warning that Labour is about to secure a mahusive majority. And this morning, I noticed something for the first time that's a little bit embarrassing. And what I noticed was that sometimes, I think if you use the word both as a descriptive and as an affectionate pejorative, so I'd probably put myself in this category, a group of the electorate that we might call the sensibles, right? So you are conscious of footballification. You, for example, would be perfectly capable of recognising the awfulness of a leader of your own party. You wouldn't have your scarf tied so tightly around your neck that you would be cheering a Boris Johnson or a Liz Truss or a Jeremy Corbyn if you were a Labour supporter or a Rishi Sunak. You kind of recognise the realities beyond absolutely entrenched tribal loyalties. So we will call ourselves the sensibles, those of us who perhaps recognise that there's no point having a mind if you never change it. So the sensibles sometimes strive to have something sensible to say. You find yourself in a political conversation and somehow an idea has taken hold in your mind that there is something troubling about a mahusive majority for the Labour Party. Of course, for that to work, there has to be something troubling about a mahusive majority for every party. So we would have to cast our minds back to 2019 and find out how many members of the right-wing media or the Conservative Party expressed reservations about Boris Johnson being gifted too big a mandate. A mandate, remember, that was secured after he'd chucked out of the party anybody prepared to stand up to him and point out the lies he was telling, specifically about the plausibility or desirability of a so-called no-deal Brexit. So I'm not going to double check everything, but I'm fairly confident that when Boris Johnson was marching on Downing Street with a mahusive majority and on the back of the expulsion of almost everybody who was both honest and courageous, I think some honest people stayed behind who weren't courageous, and some courageous people stayed behind who weren't honest. I mean, fast catamaran sailing it's no easy matter. But the idea that anybody was warning that Tories were going to be allowed to have too much power, unchallenged power, and that we were all supposed to clutch our pearls about it is objectively laughable, right? And this was a guy who, within minutes of getting his feet under the desk at Downing Street, was sending Jacob Rees-Mogg up to Balmoral to lie to the Queen and preparing to unlawfully prorogue Parliament. And, of course, to lie repeatedly to Parliament itself until he was blue in the face. So I guess there is a case for saying that a mahusive majority can be dangerous, but only if you've got a demonstrably corrupt liar in charge. And even the Tory party, in its last gasp of reasonableness, or sensibleness, if you prefer, even in its last gasp of sensibleness, the Tory party got rid of Boris Johnson ultimately for being a liar. People often forget which lie it was that proved to be the straw that broke the camel's back. Quite a few of you are saying, please stop saying mahusive. Are we not enjoying the use of the word mahoosive? It gives me a little place to go that's not supermajority. All right, huge, a huge majority. I won't say mahoosive again. Well, I may allow myself a couple of mahoosivs, but I won't have it as my go-to adjective for the possible Labour majority. People forget what the lie was that finally did for Boris Johnson. It wasn't a lie about parties. It wasn't a lie about COVID. It wasn't a lie about wallpaper. It wasn't a lie about Owen Paterson. It wasn't a lie about any of the long list of lies that it could have been about. It was actually a lie about appointing a known sex pest to a senior position in the Conservative Party, and the fact that everybody knew that he knew. So when he stood up in public and said, I had no idea, folks, that Pincher by name and Pincher by nature, I had no idea at all when I made that joke that he was widely considered to be a danger to young men in social situations. And everybody knew he was lying. And that was oddly the point that prompted Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid, for it was they. It's not that long ago. It's amazing how soon we forget to break ranks and resign, prompting Boris Johnson, of course, to move heaven and earth to try and cling on to power. But even with a huge mahoosive majority, he couldn't do it. So there came a point where the resignation of pretty much every minister in Conservative clothes, although, was it James Cleverly or Nadeem Zahawi who wrote an article for The Telegraph saying we should go. That was when Truss was on her way back. That was I get so confused. But one of them wrote an article backing Johnson about 20 minutes before Johnson said, "I won't be running. I won't be getting involved in this business." But that would be probably when Sunak got the nod after Truss had, tanked the country. So I digress slightly. A massive majority can actually be undone if the Prime Minister who has secured that majority turns out to be unbearably dishonest. So even a Conservative Party whose success since 2016 has been built on lies and nonsense, still is, by the way. Rishi Sunak today claiming that Vladimir Putin wants Labour to win, completely ignoring the fact that David Cameron was hoaxed recently into believing that he was talking to senior Ukrainians and said on tape that the Labour position on Ukraine will be no different from the Conservative position. The support for Ukraine from a Labour government will be identical to the support for a Conservative government. David Cameron telling the truth in what he thought was secret doesn't stop Rishi Sunak, because Conservative success over the last 8 years has been built on lies and nonsense, from claiming that Vladimir Putin somehow wants the Labour Party to win the general election. I don't think there's any doubt about where Vladimir Putin's loyalties lie when it comes to British politics. It's been clear since, and indeed before, Brexit. So I am supposed to be worried about a massive majority for the Labour Party. And because I am a sensible, I have allowed this to seep into my thinking. Sometimes a form of political osmosis takes place, even for those of us that pride ourselves on being, or like to pride ourselves on being evidence-based or being, fact-driven rather than feeling-driven. Sometimes I think the chatter gets so loud, or the consensus becomes so clear that you almost get infected by it. So I have found myself, when I was touring the book, I was asked a few times about this, and I found myself nodding, stroking my beard. That's the phrase I want. Not literally. Actually, I probably did it literally. Stroking my beard and trying to say something sensible. They're very important to say. I'd like to say something sensible. And if you're searching for something sensible to say, you say, well, I do worry about the lack of accountability that would be contingent upon a massive Labour majority. And I said it for 2 or 3 months of the book tour. And then I got asked it again, and I paused. And I found myself thinking, well, hang on a minute. You haven't actually thought this through. You're just repeating what you think is sensible because it sounds so sensible. Why should I be worried about a Labour Party having a majority even bigger than Boris Johnson's? I don't think, for all his faults, nobody thinks that Keir Starmer is a proven morally corrupt serial liar. He might flip-flop a bit, and you could accuse him of breaking promises made in pursuit of the Labour leadership that he is not intending to keep once he's secured it. But that's politics. Johnson's level of lying. Imagine how big a liar you have to be to get kicked out by a Brexit party, by a Tory Brexit party. How big a liar do you have to be to get chucked out by a party whose entire electoral mandate is built on lies? Answer, very big liar. Huge. Ginormous is a good word. Ginormous liar. So, 10:15 is the time. How worried are you about the size of Labour's majority? One of the really interesting things I saw in some of the polling at the weekend was that it's had the opposite effect. Use of this word supermajority, which is, as we said, simultaneously meaningful and meaningless. Use of this word supermajority has actually galvanised Labour voters, according to one piece of polling that I saw, because of something that I said to you a few weeks ago, more in hope perhaps than expectation. But the prospect of being involved in some sort of apocalyptic electoral event could prove to be a galvanising factor. If you're sitting there thinking, for example, there's no point voting because Labour are over the line, and you might think that as a Tory or a Labour supporter, there's no point voting because Labour are over the line. And then you read about the prospect of an absolutely ginormous majority. You could go one or two ways, couldn't you? You could go, well, they're even further over the line than I thought they were, so I'm definitely not going to vote. Or it's as if you could become part of a 20-0 victory. Would you want to go on the pitch when they were 15-0 up and you'd go on as the striker with the chance of scoring 5? You could be part of a team that secures the biggest victory in the history of football or in the history of sport. So I wonder whether all of the talk of supermajority is having the opposite effect to what the Tories hoped and intended. So that's part of this conversation, but the central humongous, thank you, Tony, that's a beautiful word, humongous, isn't it? Absolutely, but humongous and ginormous, much nicer than mahusive. Not least because mahusive isn't an actual word. But is there actually anything to fear? Why are they doing it? Why do you actually think they're doing it? 0345 6060 973. And is there actually a sensible position that says, no, there's no limit? No, there is a sensible position that actually says, no, you should be concerned. You can have a majority that is too big. In politics, James, you might say to me, size really does matter. And it would be concerning, stroke dangerous, stroke discombobulating, if the Labour Party were returned on Thursday with an absolutely ginormous majority. Why? Why would that be a problem? 0345 6060 973. And how dishonest is it of the Tories that barely stopped celebrating the size of Boris Johnson's majority in 2019 to treat their own supporters as if they are the stupidest people in the country? All right, the second most stupidest collection of voters in the country. For the Conservatives to say, having secured a huge majority in 2019, to pretend to their supporters that there's something intrinsically wrong with massive majorities, intrinsically dangerous with massive majorities. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Oliver's been in touch to say that ginormous is not an actual word either. Oliver, you're barred, mate. I'm not having that sort of talk on this programme. So I want to talk about massive, ginormous, huge majorities and the way the conversation in this country in the last couple of the weeks has focused on it, and the question then of whether or not there is actually anything to worry about at all, or whether it is just another example of two things: the Tories' comfort with lying and their belief that their core support is so stupid that they'll swallow these lies just as they swallowed the 2016 lies and the 2019 lies.